So I'm going to get started. We are on the mark for 12 o'clock. And I would like to introduce our panelists. And we have Jason Myers, who is the principal lawyer of Meyer Business Law, and he has dedicated the legal needs of entrepreneurs and the businesses they run. We have Ayesha Hamilton, who is the owner at Hamilton Law, and she focuses her practice on employment law and is a champion for employees. And I'm Alisa McCabe, and I'm the owner at First Steps Financial, and we help small business owners simplify processes, organize financials, and gain insight using technology and strategies. We provide accounting solutions. All information and content on this webinar is for general informational purposes only. We are giving our opinion. If you want further information, you can contact any of us privately. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And we're going to start with what's hot, what's going on, what's some news you can use. And Ayesha, I want to start with you. And you can talk about what's in your mind this week.
Yeah, so what really caught my attention this week was a couple of cases. The first one is just kind of fun and is a decision by one of my favorite judges of all time. So as you might have heard a few weeks ago, actually back in June, Asbury Park decided, their town council decided, you know what, we don't really care about what the executive orders say. We're going to pass a reopening plan that allows for indoor dining. Of course, the state of New Jersey sought an injunction against Asbury Park. The temporary injunction was granted on the very same day that they issued that ruling. And then the permanent injunction was granted just this Monday by Judge Logie in Mercer County. And let that just be a lesson. You gotta, especially in a pandemic, don't get smart about this. Don't be cute. You're gonna get smacked.
There's a law. It still matters.
It still matters. And there's a lot of people that I've heard say, oh, they're executive orders, they're not the law. Well, I think Judge Logie disagreed. So don't get cute with the government. So Asbury Park has been told that they may not reopen and permit the reopening of indoor dining facilities. And, with good cause, we'll all do it in good time. And until then, get your takeout.
This is not Pirates of the Caribbean. They're not, they're guidelines. No.
Right. They're not suggestions.
The law, there are penalties. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Now, the other case I want to tell you about is the New Jersey Supreme Court case. And it's one of those like, oh my God, so boring. Why do I even care about this? Well, the New Jersey Supreme Court held that in certain instances where you have arbitration clauses, even if the Federal Arbitration Act does not apply, so this is a carve out of the Federal Arbitration Act, there are some instances where the New Jersey Arbitration Act will apply, and you're still going to see a court enforce your arbitration clause. Now, the reason the business owners need to know that is when you're engaging in contracting, and Jason will be drafting your contracts, he might quite often draft an arbitration clause, and you want to have that comfort zone that that arbitration clause is actually enforceable. And so in New Jersey, the clause language itself is governed by this case called Alisa, which really has a pretty high threshold. So, but if you meet all of the Alisa factors, someone trying to defeat your arbitration clause is probably not going to have a good shot now in New Jersey, whereas they might have before, because the New Jersey Supreme Court really has issued this preference for just enforcing arbitration clauses, even if there are federal exemptions, which there are very few. So you want to be, if you're an employee, and essentially the case came up with delivery drivers who were exempt under the federal arbitration clause, but were told, nope, you can't have a class action. You're going to have to arbitrate this under the New Jersey law. So as an employee, you really need to be reading the language of your employment contracts. You need to be reading and consulting someone or asking someone, figuring out what it is that this arbitration clause really means. As a business owner, you love arbitration because it keeps you out of the public eye. It's not a public filing. So this is why business owners and business lawyers like Jason will always include arbitration clauses. And it's an expensive process. So if you go through the AAA, which is the American Arbitration Association, your arbitration could cost, just to open the case, close to 10 grand, right? The filing fees in state court are $250.
Yeah.
So you're really, it's a very imbalanced approach to litigation. But what you're doing is by including arbitration clauses that are now going to be quite well enforced, you're sort of sending a message that, oh, well, if you want to pick this fight with me, it's going to be expensive.
Right.
Wow.
And out of the public eye.
And private.
And in an environment where you can have a business discussion more easily.
Exactly.
Which is actually one reason why I often recommend them to my clients, because I think in a business, particularly in a business to business situation or in a business situation, to me, the key is keeping the parties talking as opposed to getting into absolute all out war, because in most business situations, the solution is monetary. And if we can just talk it through, we'll find a solution. Business entrepreneurs will find a solution because they know it's cheaper.
Yeah, but in
their time and money.
Business, employee versus employer, oftentimes the leverage we have in our cases is, do you really want this to become public?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in an arbitration venue, it's you, the employer, and an arbitrator. And that's all who's ever going to hear about this.
Right.
Wow. That's interesting.
Interesting implications, but that's just me being a law geek. So back to you.
Thank you, Ayesha. That actually is really interesting. I'm just going to report on the PPP. There is no news. How's that for news? The SBA still has not given specific guidance on filing for forgiveness. There's forms out there that are ready to go, but they're not accepting it. The banks are not accepting any forgiveness applications because they are waiting on more guidance. And if you have a PPP loan, your bank should have reached out to you already and told you this. All the banks that we've dealt with have reached out to anyone who got the PPP and said, we thought we were going to be ready July 15th. We're not. We'll let you know as soon as our portal is ready or as soon as we can accept applications. Most people, this is okay because they haven't used all their PPP money. And again, you have 24 weeks to use it. If you have not gotten a PPP, applications are still being accepted. QuickBooks Online Payroll. Actually, if you have QuickBooks Online Payroll, you can log into it and it is in there that you can apply right inside of QuickBooks Online Payroll. Capital One, I just saw the other day, they are accepting PPP applications, which they were closed before. Cabbage, which is spelled with a K, is also accepting them, and PayPal. Now, if you don't want to do the PPPs, there's still other things available. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act is when you pay your employees sick leave. Employers are eligible for refunds when they file their payroll. So when you go to pay your taxes in the payroll, it will actually refund you the money. It comes right off of it. It's excellent if you have that situation. The Coronavirus Aid Relief Economic Security Act, CARES program, as everybody knows it by, is you can defer your Social Security payments until 2021, and you can get a credit in your payroll for up to $5,000 per employee. Now, you can't use this with the PPP. It has to be used instead of the PPP. So please, just be aware of it. There's also certain criteria that you have to meet. And so if anybody needs any more detailed information, reach out to me personally. I'll go over it with you and be able to give you some direction. But that's all that's in news with me. Jason, what's new with you?
Well, first of all, great tips, and listening to you, we just have to, I just have to note, it's bad enough we have a worldwide pandemic. Did it have to be with something that's so hard to pronounce? Um, but what's the news? Let's start small and go big. Alyssa, you talked about the federal programs that a lot of people are trying to take advantage of. I know that for a lot of businesses may have applied for the EIDL to get the grant. And if you haven't carried through on any of your applications, you're getting to the point on the EIDL where you need to go ahead and either move forward or give up on it in terms of the notices we're getting from the government. On the New Jersey side, I know a lot of businesses applied on the second round for the New Jersey Economic Development Authority emergency grant, not a loan. And a lot of applications went in when that opened up for the second time. Notices have gone out from the state that they're working their way through all those applications. So, they're still working on that. We're still waiting to hear about that. But the thing I like to remind people about is New Jersey has several relief programs open. They're still open. And there's a pretty nifty eligibility wizard on the web from the state of New Jersey that you can go to, enter a few facts about your business, and it'll tell you, hey, these programs are still worth considering. And the ones I particularly like are the ones that involve loan guarantees, because you're not waiting for the government. It's just something that makes it easier for people to provide you with financing, which is something we'll talk about as we talk about cash flow in a minute. The other big news to me, just looking at what life is like for businesses, is, hey, the pandemic's worse. And it's really worse everywhere but New Jersey. And the pain we went through in April and May is kind of paying off locally right now, because we're one of the few states. I saw a report that New Jersey is one of only 3 states in the entire country that is on track to have their pandemic under control. But we have to keep it that way. And it's why we should not, businesses, look, the way we're going to get an economic recovery is to get a health recovery and keep the health recovery going.
Right.
So I really encourage all businesses and business owners, stay on the masks, stay on keeping track of your protocols and following those protocols in your business, putting up the notices in your business, because it's really only through our individual actions that will bring people back into the stores and into businesses and keep this virus under control in New Jersey while it is running so rampant everywhere else. Number one. Number two, as I see the pandemic getting worse everywhere else, you're going to see bankruptcies continue to increase as they have increased. Be aware of your supply chain. Be aware that things you're expecting to reopen may not reopen. This might be a good time to stock up on critical business supplies before the supply chain gets worse in other parts of the country. Just be prepared for change, be prepared for whatever comes, because we're not over this yet. And, the one thing we can be certain of is that we can't be certain what's going to happen. I think if we all had a clear end date, life would be a lot better. We don't have that end date. And so part of what we have to power our way through, and what we're helping you power your way through, is this reality of, you got to watch out for yourself. Mm-hmm. But part of the way you watch out for yourself is watching out for other people and their health, and what you're doing in your business. And that just still stands at the top of the news for me.
That's great. I can't agree with you more. I think we're going to be wearing masks for a couple of years. And
yeah,
I think
I got to say, like, Jason, you make a great point of, as a business, you've got to start stockpiling your PPE. This is in for the long haul. But as an employee too, make sure, even if you're like, hey, listen, it's my employer's job to provide this stuff, don't do that. Just get your own stuff, because at the end of the day, your health is paramount.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really hard in this environment to separate signal from noise.
Yes.
But the facts are out there, and just sort of take a deep breath, look at what's happening, put the pressure groups and put the social media bots aside, and just look at the facts. Okay. one fact you can look at is among developed countries, U.S. is doing worst at this. And if you look at a country like Japan, a more densely populated, largely reopened, virus almost completely under control. Why? Because it's a society where people just wear masks all the time.
Yeah, and they have.
People wearing masks.
I
And
just
you know
think- I do.
what else is different?
Yeah.
You know, it's scientific method, folks. You know, that's the difference. So
They actually did a really good thing. They had Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Oh, I love his little video.
I love him too. They had this, he did this short clip about wearing a mask. And he said, it's not about you. It's about protecting others. So when I wear a mask, I'm telling you, I care about you. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think that, you know, if that's the message, like you're putting on a mask because you care about your fellow humans.
And for what it's worth, new article in USA Today about studies saying, hey, you know, the mask is actually protecting you too. Mask is cutting down the amount of virus you may be inhaling.
Yeah.
And the numbers are starting to come back that it looks like people who wear masks are more likely to be asymptomatic or to have a mild case.
Yeah.
Look out for number one. And let me say, since we don't know what's coming, the one thing we know is we better have cash in the bank.
Oh.
And that brings us to our topic.
Let me tell you, before you start, Alisa, one of the points, you know, you gave the update on the PPP loan, and I just have to throw this in there. So in the news is a lot, you know, and I'm talking about legal news, right? Large firms, large New Jersey firms are getting 5 million plus in PPP loans. Now, as I sat down to think about this, I have cases against those large firms. Those cases involve insurance policies. So if they're defense inside, that means the insurance costs and the costs of defense are coming out of the policy limit, right? So that's less money for my client to claim against that policy. Plus you got the PPP loan, and my tax dollars are paying for that. It's just a mind-boggling situation. I spend some of my time quite pissed off.
I think most of the country is angry at the moment. So you have a lot of company there.
I'm right there.
Yeah. Well, I will hopefully the things that I will talk about might like lessen your anger a little bit, because we do have some interesting statistics around cash flow, and 61% of businesses struggle with cash flow, and it's just a fact that some businesses do that, and 82% will fail due to cash shortages. So something to think about when we're talking about this cash flow. Why is it so important to look at it? Why is it important to have this? Goldman Sachs did a study in March when all this started, and 51% of businesses reported that they can't weather more than 3 months of the current situation, which means that in my translation, and this is my translation, is that they didn't have 3 months worth of savings. So, and then they did another study in April, and 93% of businesses say that the current situation will impact the way their business operates. I'm always an optimist. I think it's great that it's going to change the way you operate your business. I think businesses are running more efficient than they have been before. And I think some of the things that are going to change are going to be really, really good. Moody Analytics came up with 73% of businesses say they need at least 1 month of revenue to reopen. And I believe that 100%. If you have a coffee shop and you need to reopen, what does that look like? So I think that's why this, the cash is king is a great saying, and we need to preserve it. And if you have cash, you need to keep it. I am a huge fan of Dave Ramsey. And I do have to say that Dave Ramsey, one of the things that he promotes is to have 3 months of living expenses put aside. Actually, I think he even says 3 to 6 months. And I think that's valuable for businesses. And whether we're in a pandemic or not, these types of situations are going to happen no matter what. It could be, you could lose your biggest customer. You could lose your best salesperson. You could lose something that is going to decrease your revenue. How do you live until you can support, till you can get to a point where you've been able to reclaim that revenue?
And Alisa, we're not just talking here about, I mean, we're not just talking here about profitability, about I've got to make more money from what I do, right? Cash flow is a different thing. Cash on hand is not just I have to make more money from what I do. So what are the kinds of things you're telling your clients about?
So what we're going through is we're telling them to evaluate their expenses and stop what's not essential. And I can't stress this enough. One of the things that are essential is marketing. Do not stop marketing. It keeps you top of mind with your clients. And then evaluate your revenues. What streams and clients are most profitable? This is where it comes into play, where you know how much you're making for each client, for each stream of revenue, for each product that you produce. What is the most profitable, and focus on that. The other thing that I'm also really working with our clients, we're evaluating different scenarios of what happens if things stay the same, what happens if things get better, and what's the worst case scenario. And in general, we plan for the worst and hope for the best. So we have a cash flow projection for each scenario. And like, what if you have no income? That's the worst. How do you survive, and how long can you survive with zero income? Restaurants need to know, especially right now, when you're open at 25% capacity or 50% capacity, what does cash flow look like? And again, the storm is not going to be the last that our businesses will weather. There's going to be other things that come our way. So putting the work in now to figure out what your cash flow is going to be a long-term investment in your company.
Well, I'll give you an example of something I've had to change, right? So because of cash flow issues in my clients' world, right, they've come to me and said, well, I was on an hourly billing cycle. Can you switch to contingency? Which means the cash flow that I relied on coming in that month, every month, from that one particular client is gone now. So you have to sort of be taking some really hard decisions to say, well, okay, so that dried up. How am I going to change? Do I develop other verticals? Do I shift the focus of my marketing? But you're absolutely right. If you stop marketing, you're just dead in the water. That's it. It's over.
And it's funny because a lot of people will cut marketing, and it's just, they feel it's not essential. And you should be able to be calculating the return on that marketing. And again, this is just an overview. If anybody wants more details and you want to get into this more, I love this. This is what we do day in and day out for our clients. So reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to answer anybody's questions. Another thing that can help with cash flow, and it's kind of what you were talking about, Ayesha, is your clients, like how to collect on, what they're going to pay you. So the longer an invoice is outstanding, the harder it is to collect. So if you stay on top of your invoicing and collections on your invoicing, you're more likely to keep your cash flow going better. One of the things that we do, and we try to get our clients to do, is do automatic payments. Whenever you have a contract, and when you create a contract with a new client, put in automatic payments. There's a form you can fill out that requires them to put in their ACH information, and you can put in the agreement that, and lawyers can do it too. They actually have certain programs that'll do it, where you can collect, like, okay, we have to, your retainer's out, and we're going to collect, 10 more hours, 5 more hours, whatever it is to put in there. And it really helps with cash flow. Another thing is to review this weekly. And I love the saying, energy flows where attention goes. And if you're focused on your cash, it will grow. And you will be able to keep it.
One of the things I've encountered, and I think this is just a psychological thing. So I've always taken credit cards, right? I've always found that people will pay their bill on a credit card quicker than they will write the check, because psychologically, the credit card payment isn't hitting them for a couple of months and they can delay that out, but they know they need the service. And so consider, taking credit cards where you may not have before because you didn't want to pay the fees and stuff like that. But the value of that money today is worth the 3%.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. Any way that you can get the cash in, get it in as quickly as possible. Because like you said, if you're waiting on a check, someone's going to write you a check. Who knows when it's going to come? And that really impacts, how do you run payroll in this economy? And how are you going to do things going forward that have to do? So
these are all things you need to set up, deliberately and explicitly, and preferably at the beginning of time,
yes,
and have it in writing.
clear expectations.
Tough to change people later on, although you can do that and you can make it
Yeah.
worth their while. But to give a preview of where I'm going on this, the pieces of paper you have with your suppliers and with your customers are going to matter, right?
Right. Yeah. And it is. And those are the things that if you have the expectations set ahead of time, you can negotiate them if you need to. And that makes all the difference. If you're thinking about doing a weekly cash flow and you don't know, where to even start, you can look at what are your expenses? What did I spend last week? And then, how much came in, and you can do it week by week. And I think that's actually the best way to start, because you start in small bites. And then you can look at what is the balance today and what income and expenses do I expect to come in this week. And then you can look at what happens in 2 to 4 weeks. A lot of companies will do 8 to 12 week running cash flow forecast. And then it makes it easy to know what the different scenarios are. So if you're looking 12 weeks out and you put in the worst case scenario that you have no income, when do you run out of cash? Is it after the 12 weeks? Rock on, you're doing great. Just
right.
think
the way I'm going to make sure I still have, in that scenario, the way I'm going to make sure I still have cash in 8 or 12 weeks is what I spend today.
Yes, it's so interesting. And so, when you figure out what your process is and how you're going to talk about cash flow and what you're going to look at each week, at the end, the things that you should know is that where the cash came from and where it went last week. How much cash is in the bank today, and what's unpaid this week and what is coming in this week. So you're going to know what's going on this week, and then have expectations of upcoming cash. How much is going to come in and how much is going to go out? And then from those things, once you have this process, you can create an action list of what are you going to do to make this cash flow that you have expectations of in the future? Are you going to call clients to make sure that, this payment is a week late or this payment is a day late? I got to tell you, I have a client, she is a rock star when it comes to accounts receivable. Whenever, and she has this as a standard, and we do her accounts receivable. If it's a day late, she wants us to call them. And I have to tell you that because we've put this policy in place and every one of her clients knows it, they never pay late because they don't want to hear from us. They just don't want to get that phone call. So once you put it in place, people will appreciate the consistency, and they will also pay you because they don't want to be annoyed. You can also set up an action list of payments to vendors and decisions on spending, but it empowers you to get control of your cash. And if that's the one thing I can leave you with, is to do whatever you can to really focus on your cash.
I think as entrepreneurs, we spend so much time I just want to practice law. I just want to get out there and do my thing. But I've spent some time this morning checking in with different companies that I use for deposition services to say, what's your per page cost? What's your appearance fee? What are you basing that on? What are the new deals now for us to develop relationships with? It took an hour, right? At the end of the day, that was time very well spent, because now I have a really clear idea of who I'm going to use and why I'm going to use them.
Yeah.
And I've got, 15 depositions scheduled over the next 3 months. They know that now. They also know and understand that it's a good idea for us to be in business together, right? To develop a relationship. And especially, if we're in this for the long run, right?
Yeah.
So there's just an expectation of we all need to just be smarter about the pennies. Whereas in the past, it was like, it's fine, whatever. From an employee's perspective, think about where you're, do you even have to think about cash flow, right? That's the wrong attitude. That is absolutely the wrong attitude, because if you are in an environment where furloughs are commonplace, layoffs are commonplace, your employer may not be getting the PPP loans they thought they were going to get. Even if they do, it may not be enough. The IDL funds are washed away. Who knows if there's more? Who knows if you're getting the NJEDA stuff? So you need to start thinking about yourself as being a key and valued member of the team, right? So really focusing on productivity, making sure that you're letting your employer know before they even ask all of the stuff you accomplished, right? Be proactive now, because this is about keeping your job and being seen as worth the dollar that someone is spending on you. And that's the difference.
To use Alisa's language, let them know how you are essential and
That's
how
right.
you bring in the cash, right?
That's exactly right. And I think that, does it feel like, well, why the hell should I have to do that? It may, but at the end of the day, you want to be the one still standing with the job.
Yeah.
So really start to think, and I will tell you that over the years with employees, I've always complained about, as the entrepreneur, nobody cares about this business like I care about this business.
Yeah.
You're absolutely freaking right. Nobody cares about the business like you care about the business. But a good employee thinks like an entrepreneur, right? A good employee thinks about, hey, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm still standing when the other cuts come through, right? So my advice to you a little bit as an employee would be, stop thinking like a W-2, start thinking more like a business owner. And I think that's really sort of like my key takeaway, is figure out what you need to be to make sure that the team can't function without you.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, that's big, because everything's going to be staying status quo at the moment. But I think what you're saying is going to happen. There are going to be layoffs. And if you are not that key employee, why should they keep you?
Well, and I think part of what I love about these conversations we're having, and this approach to issues, whether you're an employee or an employer, is to me, the key reality of the modern economy. And to me, it's been this way since, for 10 or 15 years at this point, is, hey, we're all entrepreneurs now. And we all have to think that way. And when I do mentoring of high school students, college students in entrepreneurship, and this is part of my message. It's like, we're all entrepreneurs. You don't need to we all own a business, and the business is us.
Yeah.
We have personal brands to build and protect and strengthen. Most people now, or a lot of people now, are doing more than one thing to bring in money. A lot of people who thought, I'm going to go into the corporate mothership. I'm going to be safe. I'm going to keep my head down. I'm going to do my job. Particularly when we got to be over 50, let's say, we all fell, we fell victim to the one legal form of discrimination left, which is ageism based on how much you cost. And so many entrepreneurs I know are, used to being the corporate mothership, and they didn't want to be entrepreneurs, and now they are. And newsflash, they're having a good time. So, everyone needs to, what's the thing that they say now? Everyone, people who are graduating college now will change careers 7 times, not jobs, careers. So we all have to think like entrepreneurs, and let the pandemic be a reminder that it's time to get gear.
As an entrepreneur, I think you want to think about also how much it costs, literally costs your company in employee turnover.
Yeah.
So listen,
so many businesses miss that.
Keep the team, if you like the team you got, then if one of your team members is coming to you and asking for an accommodation, listen, pay attention. Maybe it's something that you weren't willing to do in other times, but now you are literally struggling for your survival, and you need the people on the boat that are willing to row. And if this person is saying, listen, I'm absolutely willing to row, I just need to row from home, think about it. It's possible. It may be feasible. And, for the same point from the employee side, keep lines of communication open. Don't just assume, well, they have to do this for me. Let me tell you, you don't want to pick that fight, right? Because to even be picking that fight, you've already been capped.
From the employer side, I think you were absolutely on the money. I know so many, I have encountered so many business owners over the years who just completely ignore or underestimate the cost of turnover. And businesses I have encountered, and some I have even worked for, with turnover in the 30-40%, and just completely blind to how much that costs in recruiting and onboarding and training.
And right now, when every dollar counts,
right,
you have to be really careful about that.
Totally.
And people are hiring. I got to tell you, there's a lot of our clients are hiring, but at the same time, that dollar is very, very valuable when you're talking about all the training that needs to go in, and health insurance and all the other things that, require expense. So I agree. If you have good people on your team, invest in them.
Keep them.
Yeah.
So as I look, as I look at cash flow, sort of, 2 filters, and one is, all right, who's this, what is there an industry that this is really going to hit? And then sort of, okay, well, and what about everyone else? So if I could, let me start with who I think really has to have their eyes open to cash flow in this environment. And if I had to pick one industry, I would say it's construction. Construction, remodeling, home improvement, anyone in those trades. The crush is coming, and most of the contractors I know are already feeling it. And the reason for that, to me, is we're all at home and we're all looking at the stuff that's driving us nuts, or we're all at home and we realize we're going to be at home and we want the home environment to provide what we're not getting from vacations or travel or whatever else, right? So the crush is coming, and what that means is you're going to get a lot of jobs, and those jobs are going to drive a lot of expenses, and those expenses could hit before you get the revenue, before you get the income to match it. Suddenly you're ordering, 10 jobs worth of, lumber or concrete or dumpsters or wiring or whatever it is, and you're ordering that stuff to keep up with this sudden demand to do more and more jobs. And you got to be careful that those orders are not being placed ahead of when you're getting the money to pay for those orders, or you will succeed yourself right into a cash flow crisis. And this is something I think a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of businesses miss, which is you have a real cash flow risk on sudden success. I had a client once who thought they had finally had their great breakthrough when a large retail chain agreed to carry their product. And I pointed out to them that large retail chain didn't have to, could place orders and didn't have to pay for the merchandise they ordered until 3 months after they sold it off the shelf. And I said, the worst case for you is this retail chain calls up and orders 1 million units.
Yeah.
How are you you're not going to get paid for those units for 6 months. What are you going to do? So you've got to have that's a place to me where you really have to have your eye as an entrepreneur on the cash flow and what you do about it.
That's such a good point, because I know that a lot of entrepreneurs feel like success, they've really made it when they work with like a national company. They're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this is amazing. Any of my clients that work with bigger companies, you know, they can work with Bloomberg or AT&T or any of those big companies, and you feel like, oh, this is the best. But then you find out that their payout is 90 or 120 days.
Yeah.
And you've done all the work, you've paid all your people, you've put out all this expenses, and you have to wait 6 months to get paid.
Yep.
And how do you float that? And it's
So-
something that I think people don't think about when they get into that situation. And I wonder, I actually have someone who does marketing for hospitals, and the hospitals pay out they pay out 120 days. That's their standard.
Right.
And that was something that some other businesses went to, but that was their standard.
You got to have your eyes open to this from the beginning and do something about it from the beginning. And let me talk generally and then specific, I think, on this point. You know, generally, I think as entrepreneurs, as small to medium-sized business owners, okay, you've basically made the sale. You've heard from the large buyer, we like you best. Okay, there are reasons they like you best. You may be offering more personal service. You may be more responsive. You may have a unique or distinctive product or service offering. It may be that you fit some set aside if you are women-owned or minority-owned or disabled or veteran-owned or just a small business set aside. There's a reason they want to work with you. Underline that point on the payment. And you can say, you know, look, I know your usual payment is 120 days. Doesn't work for me. Let me make it worth your while to pay me on better terms. Or part of the cost of working with me is to pay me on better terms. And you may need to discount. You may need to, and look at the cost, look at the cash, look at the time value of money, what you'd have to spend to borrow that money until it comes in, you know, to pay for your expenses till they come in, and think about, you know, taking that cost and passing along in discounts, or just make it the cost of doing business with you. But you got to deal with it up front, and you got to deal with it in the paper, and you can't just take what they send you and sign it. Have somebody look at it. In terms of the construction world, some of what I'm seeing people do is say, look, this may be a place where you do want to spread those expense costs out. And the way you do that is with financing. And maybe it's a PPP, maybe it's in the ADL, maybe it's some, you know, maybe you take advantage of these New Jersey small business loan guarantee programs. Money is relatively cheap right now. If you've got those contracts coming in, maybe it's time to work with a lender, get something in place where you can spread that cost of buying all these materials out by doing some financing. I think the other thing for contractors specifically, for everybody else generally, is this is the time, use the time you have now to get your contract house in order. Go to that new piece of paper you've known you've needed to do. For contractors, I keep saying this, there is a cost of the state of New Jersey says you need to have a written contract, and it needs to have 10 specific things in it. And if you don't have those things in your contract, your clients can stiff you because you're not complying with the law. They have an excuse to not pay you. Okay, talk about a cash flow hit.
Yeah.
Yet, I know of all the contractors I deal with and know, I think the number remains close to zero of the contractors who have in their written agreement everything the state of New Jersey says they need to have in their agreement. So take care of it. And when you take care of it and you put that new piece of paper in place, to me, there's two cash flow things you can really aim at. One is nail down your payment schedule. Be specific about what comes up front. Be specific about what's refundable and what's not refundable. Be very specific about your milestones. And I say this to contractors and consultants alike. Make sure that piece of paper is clear about when I'm done, about when the job is done. And try to pick milestones that are not subjective milestones, like, well, you're satisfied, okay? Make it things like, when I deliver X, I get this milestone, okay? When I deliver the first, for instance, for consultants, I would say, when I deliver the first draft, that's a milestone, because there's no question about when I deliver it to you. You can go back and forth forever on drafts after that. That's fine. But I delivered draft 1, and that's a milestone, and I'm sending you an invoice. And if they don't pay the invoice, you need to let them know about it. Same thing for contractors. Yes, you're going to leave. Believe me, if I'm hiring a contractor, I'm going to leave 10, 20% to pay at the end. But let me get paid that 80% before I get to the end, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think when you take care of your, go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to add to you, because the stuff you're saying is so incredibly critical, right? And if you don't have someone like Jason drafting these contracts that are incredibly clear at the start of the relationship, you as a business owner are also not that comfortable saying, well, this is the contract and these are the terms. And if we're going to work together, these are the terms that we're going to work together under. Because I think one of my key takeaways has been, as I navigate this pandemic, is my instincts about who was a good client and who was a bad client are now more important than ever. And so if you have a retainer agreement or an independent contractor agreement, still stick to those instincts, right? And one of the things I know people like Jason do is when they draft the contract, they also explain it to you. So you understand when you're going back to your client to say, listen, I'm sorry, these are the terms and I can't change them because, you know, it's as much for my protection as yours. But not having a well-crafted agreement in place before you're entering into that client relationship, it's just the kiss of death.
And this goes both ways. I mean, the thing about cash flow and what the deal is and what the contract is, it's offensive and defense. If I'm selling something, if I'm the provider, right, then it's offensive. I want to keep more cash. I want to get it sooner. If I'm buying something, then it's defensive. I'm trying to spend less cash. I'm trying to put out less money before I get the income back. We're going to have to work that out. But these are terms on which we can have a discussion. These are terms on which reasonable parties can agree and then write down what it is. And you may need to give up something to get, let's say, the payment terms that you need, one way or the other. And you just find the thing that works for the other side, and you get it written down. But if you don't get it written down, then you're out of luck. And let's face one reality of cash flow. When cash gets tight, businesses sit back and they say, I'm not paying everybody. I cannot pay. I'd love to pay everybody. I can't pay everybody. Who am I going to pay? And the people I'm going to pay first of all, are the people I depend on most. The other people I'm going to pay first are the people who I know I can't get away with not paying.
And the people you'll pay last are the handshake agreements.
Right.
I mean, please, if there's one thing you take away from today is in this day and age, no handshake agreements.
Yeah.
And I have people come to me and we end up in litigation over handshakes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
true.
right. That's right. Write it down, man.
Maybe.
And Ayesha, I'm going to pick up on something else you talked about at the beginning, and I'm going to interrupt myself first and say, we do want to make sure we take everyone's questions. If you have any questions, type them into chat, and we'll make sure we leave time before we sign off to answer your questions. But to finish the thought with a couple of other ideas, because I think I promised 5 ideas. I got a couple more to go. Ayesha, picking up on what you talked about at the very beginning, arbitration clauses, dispute resolution in your contract. I think in the cash flow centric world, that becomes even more important. And I'll give you an example, right? You don't want to make it so that if your customer's unhappy, their only remedy or an available remedy is to just not pay you, right? That's a cash flow hit, particularly because I don't want somebody, if they're the ones who, trying to figure out who they're not going to pay, to sort of trump up something and to build something minor into something major, and suddenly they're not paying me, because I don't understand this bill, or, I'm not sure you really met it. So this is a place where not only do you want to be precise about when you get paid, but you want very clear terms, how you dispute a contract. If you haven't done it in time, you're out of time, right? You only have this amount of time how to dispute an invoice. You only have this amount of time. If you haven't done it, the invoice is deemed to be accepted, right? these are all things you want to nail down so that you try to avoid a world where people are using using some excuse of a dispute to avoid paying you when cash is critical. And the other thing about defining what done is there are a lot of ways you can do that. One interesting idea I came across is, particularly for delivering goods, how you are defining what is now called the ISO term of when it is that goods are delivered. If you're delivering FOB, freight on board, then the moment I put it on the truck, I can invoice you. It's not just that risk has passed and it's now your risk while the good is in transit. It's that my job is done and I can bill you. So you may want to think in that written contract about when you are defining delivery, if you're delivering goods, and that may give you a way to move that cash up in time. So there's some ideas about what to do, but they all boil down to put it in writing, and above all, actually I'm going to throw one more out. Above all, that writing, while it's covering all these things, to me it needs to be of a language and in a form that moves closings faster. The final way you can improve your cash flow is to get to closing faster, get to the deal being done faster. And that is something that your paperwork can promote rather than impede. A lot of people think, oh, if I get in the written contracts, then I got to send it back and forth and it's going to slow things down and people are going to get upset. It's going to be longer to closing. If you do it right, your paperwork is a form, you do electronic signatures, you've already anticipated the things that trip clients up, your paperwork is easy to read and not legalese, then in fact it moves closing faster. And that makes cash register ring as well.
And Jason, to your point, doing the work up front makes a big difference when you come to the end of the agreement or the arrangement. In ours, we put in a lot of work at the beginning to set up everything so that we actually have a kickoff call with our new clients. And we say, this is what you can expect from us. And this is what we expect from you. And so they know what's expected of them and they know what they can expect of us. And I think those expectations, when you manage those, Stephen Covey talked a lot about those in his book, and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he talked a lot about managing expectations. And I think, I don't know, Jason, I think one time you said something and it stuck with me for a long time. When you don't manage expectations, you end up in litigation.
It's very true.
It's right. It's and that's the best role. This is one thing I keep saying to people, clients and otherwise, which is, if it's a piece of paper, if you have a contract but no one ever reads it because it's just gobbledygook, then it doesn't set expectations. The best contract is the one that's the recipe that people actually read, because then that helps manage their expectations.
On the point of managing expectations, right? So as an entrepreneur, if you're having a cash flow issue, pick up the phone and call your landlord and say, I need some help. Call your Amex card. Everybody is actually willing to work with you. But if you don't keep the lines of communication open, I've had clients call me and say, look, I can't pay X all today. So for the first time in my entire practice, I've entered into payment plans. I never would have considered that before. But you know what? It's the difference between me getting paid over 3 months or me not getting paid at all. Right.
And
so,
those are.
I think if you're gonna, let me turn that around a little bit. Given that we're not sure what's happening with supply chains, and that we don't want to get caught in a cash flow crisis, one thing I think may come out of the whole pandemic is, the fading out of what used to be just-in-time supply chains, right? It was like, I don't need to order that in advance because, FedEx can get it to me in 2 days. I'm going to wait until I've got a 3-day supply left and then place the order. Because why place the order any sooner than that, right? Well, the reason why is you're paying FedEx and you may be paying rush charges and you don't know if you're necessarily going to get it. So to me, there's a temptation for a lot of businesses, particularly if you're able to get funding in this circumstance to say, you know what, I'm going to stock up. Okay,
Mhm.
well, from whoever you're stocking up, you're about to do them a favor. You're about to place a big order and you're about to pay for it.
Mhm.
So that's a time to also pick up the phone and say, look, you know how I usually buy from you, sort of like 1 week supply, 2 week supply at a time? If I place an order for a 3-month supply, what are you going to do for me?
Mhm.
What discount can you give to me?
Mhm.
What payment plan can you give to me? How can you make my cash flow life better while I make your cash flow life better? And,
Right.
and let's remember our economics 101 concept of, the only thing from economics 101 that stuck with me, Pareto optimality. The idea that it's not a zero-sum game. There are economic solutions that are win-win
Yeah.
for both sides. And that's the kind of deal that entrepreneurs look for.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. It's time to start to look at these things. Someone else had suggested for negotiating with a landlord on the rent, instead of saying, you know, reducing my rent, can we work out that you take out a percentage of my profit? Um, it's highly risky, but the counterpoint to that was landlords are going to have a really hard time finding people to fill commercial spaces. So
Mhm.
instead of getting nothing for your commercial space, it's going to be based off of someone's income that they make. So there's definitely going to be options out there to keep everybody's cash flow rolling. And like you said, there are win-win situations.
And though when you're talking to landlords and mortgage companies, really talk about when the balance of that payment is going to be due, right?
Yes.
Don't actually assume that they're going to tag it on to the end of the period, because what they're going to do is, if you've missed 3 payments, they're going to make all of those 3 due in month 4.
Oh,
And you got to be really cautious about that. I know we've talked about that, but I still get calls from people saying, this is what they're trying to do to me. Is it okay? And I'm like, well, do you have the cash flow to pay 5 months worth of payments in 1 month? Because I can tell you right now, I don't even know your business, and I know you don't.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So why are you setting yourself up for a default situation? So I think landlords and mortgage companies are willing to be reasonable, but you
Mhm.
have to have the conversation. You
Right.
can't stick your head in the sand and go, well, everybody's hurting, so they'll understand. That's not how that's going to work.
Hey, Alisa, we got like a minute and a half left. What are we
Yeah.
talking about in 2 weeks?
So we'll be back again on July 29th, the last week in July, and we're going to be talking about innovating and how to be innovative about it. We are going to be talking about, you know, what things that, you know, we've heard about, that we've seen, that we've done, and we are looking for people to, you know, ask us questions and comments on what they've had to do to be innovative during this time. What's worked, what hasn't, and then we'll see everybody back here.
Find some sources of inspiration for you
Yeah.
to help you be entrepreneurial.
Wait a
But it's
minute.
always a
Jason said that he's going to have a funny joke.
pleasure. Stay tuned for that joke. You don't want to miss that joke in 2 weeks. The joke I stole.
Um,
Guys.
great talking with everybody. Have a great 2 weeks. Stay safe, and hopefully our weather will stay wonderful like it is.
Yep. Keep powering that pivot and wear a mask.
Wear a mask. That's what it is. Mask up, everybody.
Take care.
All right. Bye.